Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled I Live Long Enough to See Myself Become the Villain. I'm in Walmart trying to find a very specific dish soap. I'm not a frequent Walmart shopper, so it takes me a good lap around the store to finally find the cleaning products section. I'm exhausted at that point and wander the aisle listlessly, mouth half open and mentally overwhelmed by the seemingly endless options. Then I see her, a woman, wearing a plain, blue-collared shirt and khaki pants. She's facing away from me, but my mind says, plain blue shirt and vague pants, that's the uniform of a Walmartian employee. I beeline to her, desperate to get some help in this mind-melting, free-market utopia, hellscape. This was back in the day of mandatory masks, so when I sheepishly mumble, "Excuse me, do you know where I can find stupid product I don't remember?" She doesn't seem to fully hear me, so she turns toward me. The second I finish my sentence, I realize that she is not an employee, but just another innocent person lost in the retail sauce like me, but wearing a blue shirt and unassuming pants. Oh crap. I turn to look at the products on the shelf in front of me, hoping she didn't hear me and I can just pretend I'm fascinated by the variety of soft scrub available on the shelf above her. But my ruse doesn't last long. She says something like, "I'm sorry, what?" And I fold under her third degree like a cheap lawn chair and confess my mistake. She laughs. I laugh. We laugh. I leave the store without buying anything and never return. The next story is titled No, This Phone Number Isn't the Disability Office. When I moved to my first apartment, I got a landline and a new phone number. This was in 2001, in the US, so I didn't have a cell phone. I gave my new number out to those who needed it. Every day, I would come home from work to 3 to 5 messages on my voicemail from people telling their SSN, medical history, employer, address, etc. All protected information that I, as a member of the public, would not ever need to know about someone. I called some of the people back, the ones who had left their phone number on VM, and they were very surprised to hear that the owner of the phone number was just a regular member of society. They thought they were calling a government disability office. I changed my VM message to be even clearer that it was mine and not the other place. I still was getting 2 to 3 calls like that every day. I looked up the office because I got the address of it from one of the callers that I called back. I called that office, and the receptionist was so surprised that the phone number they had at their old location was given to someone in an apartment. She promised to let everyone know, and I said I'd put their new number in my VM greeting plus give it out to those I could call back. She thanked me profusely and said, "So that's why people haven't been calling back and have been saying they called with information that we didn't get. Thank you for being an honest person." The next story is titled I Had to Change the Color of My High-Vis Company Shirts. I do commercial electrical work and a lot of my jobs require me to wear high-vis colors. Pretty much you have 2 choices. Orange or yellow. The yellow shows stains a lot more than the orange, so of course orange was the choice. I have to go into Home Depot to get materials when it's closer than the supply house. Being that I'm actually in the electrical trade, when people ask me for help I know where everything is and what materials they would need to complete their task. It got to the point every time I went in I was helping customers because I'm a nice guy and don't want my city to burn down. Now my company shirts are high-vis yellow and I don't get asked for help at the depot, but often still help people who look confused about the products before them. The next story is titled A Short and Wholesome Tale of My Youth. When I, 26, was around 10 or so, my family and I took a trip to a museum that had a display on ancient Egypt, including actual mummies laid out in display cases. Me, being the history nerd I was absolutely ecstatic. I'd read dozens of books on ancient Egyptian history, studied the mythology, etc. I was over the moon to be able to see a real live, dead, mummy. We'd been at the museum for about an hour, with me loving every second, when a group of school kids came through with their teacher. They were impressed with the mummy I was standing by, too, and started asking questions of their teacher who didn't know the answers. I did. The first words out of my mouth were, "Do you want to know how they embalmed them?" So, I spent the next half hour telling the kids everything I knew, from how they dried the body, to why they removed certain organs, to the ancient Egyptian belief in the afterlife. And they were eating it up. Afterwards, the teacher came up to me and said something like, "You're the youngest docent I've ever seen. You do work here, right?" And I said no. That I just loved ancient history, still do, and wanted to share everything I knew with people so they'd love ancient history, too. She looked really surprised for a second, then laughed and told me I'd done a really good job, and that I should consider a job at a museum in the future. Still my favorite memory from that trip. The next story is titled Screwing Over Landlord's Father Who Parks on Our Driveway. The story starts 4 years ago. I was living with 2 friends in London within a 2-minute walk from a popular underground station. We all were and still are teachers, but not at the same school. This will all be relevant later. We were renting from a friend of a friend who was abroad for the year. Our house had a drive with 2 parking spaces, which was convenient as we had 2 cars between the 3 of us and parking on the road was somewhat restricted. To prevent people from driving to a road near the station, parking and then taking the train to commute to work, all the surrounding area including our road had non-restricted parking except for in 2 time slots. Between 12 and 1 and 5 and 6. So you could park most of the time, but you could never leave the car on the road for more than a few hours or you'd get a ticket. Our problems arose early on, not with our landlord as you might expect, but with landlord *Thai father, henceforth known as LSF. LSF lived in the same area, but a 20-minute walk away from the station as opposed to our 2 minutes. We quickly found that he was driving to the station and parking on what used to be his son's but what was now our drive. Either because he didn't want to walk the 20 minutes or because he wanted to avoid the expensive official station car park. It went something like this. 7 a.m. We leave the house to get to school, leaving both driveways empty. 8 a.m. LSF leaves for work, finds our driveway devoid of cars, and parks on our drive. 5 p.m. We come home from school and find LSF's car on our drive. One of us parks in the other space, the other cannot park on the road for another hour without getting ticketed. So we'd have to go and try and find another road to park in without the restricted parking. Not likely, circle for the hour, or just cross our fingers and risk getting a ticket. None of the options were ideal and it varied which one we went for. 7:30 p.m. LSF returns, takes his car off the drive and we can then fetch our car and put it back on the drive. We went through all the usual channels first. Leaving a polite note on the windscreen, leaving less than polite notes on the windscreen. Soon, we called our landlord and asked him to speak to his father. Whilst he took our side though, our landlord clearly didn't have much of a spine and this failed to get LSF off our drive either. Eventually, we lie in wait one evening for him to come and collect his car so that we can speak to him in person ourselves. The conversation goes something like this. Us. Excuse me, LSF, but it's very inconvenient for you to keep parking here. And our tenancy clearly includes use of the double driveway. LSF. I helped pay for the deposit on this house. I'll park here if I bloody well like. Us. So what do you expect us to do then? LSF. Not my problem. Find somewhere else. I don't care where. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. We know full well that LSF lives somewhere in the neighborhood. What if we park on his drive and give him a taste of his own medicine? We can just imagine it now. LSF leaving our drive, driving home, only to find his own drive occupied. We think it's a genius plan. The only problem is that we don't know where the bastard lives, but we shrug those concerns off. Nothing a bit of old internet digging won't fix. So we start our research. We search for this guy's last name in conjunction with our local area and whilst we find several old newspaper articles with our landlord in as he used to be part of the neighborhood watch. We find nothing on his father, except dodgy-looking websites which want us to pay a fee for his telephone number and address. We're on the verge of giving up when it hits me. If the internet can't help us, we're going to have to get a bit old school. I call up my parents who live a few miles away, but in the same borough. And at the back of their dusty cupboard, they find the answer to my hopes and prayers. Obsolete and untouched for 10 years or more, it's the phone book. And as luck would have it, LSF is in it. Telephone number, and most importantly address. We put our plan into action that next evening. We come home from work, and as usual LSF's car is on our drive. Tonight, we don't circle for an hour. Tonight we drive to his address and park it squarely on his empty driveway. And on the windscreen, we leave a note. As suggested, we parked somewhere else. He never parked on our driveway again. We later found out from the landlord that he got a ticket from parking on his road, which had permit-only parking for the people without driveways. That's karma for you. The next story is titled Family Assumes I'm a Waitress Because I'm Carrying a Coffee Mug. This happened years ago, but my friends still bring it up when we go to a Wetherspoons. I was literally just walking across the building to grab a coffee from the machine because if you live in the UK you'll know that at Spoons you get given an empty mug and you go and get your unlimited coffee. Well, I walked past the entrance to get my coffee, holding this mug, and a family of 2 parents and 2 kids just walked in and the dad sees me and goes, "Excuse me, are you serving breakfast?" So I just stopped and looked at him stunned because it was 8 a.m. I'm kind of awkward anyway, and I hadn't had my coffee yet. He goes, Hello, I said, "Are you serving breakfast?" I just frowned and continued walking to the coffee machine. I would have loved to see their reaction to me getting a coffee and sitting down at a customer table. The next story is titled Sad I Don't Work Here Lady Story. This happened 10 years ago. It is probably one of the saddest, I don't work here, story in this sub. When I visited my cousin in the Philippines, we stopped by at a small outside diner. The diner is run by a family who also owns the small store that is located at the front of their home. So, my cousin, my kids and I were almost finished with our meal, when an angry woman probably in her late 60s came towards us. Slams her fist at the table and said, "Why are you eating? You should be at the kitchen. Doing the dishes. I can't believe we let you live in our home and not pulling your weight." Confused, we said, "Ma'am, we don't work and live here." She continues to yell at us and threatened to beat my kid with the end of a broom handle. Now at the same time, a young lady who was working at the counter witnessed what was going on, and quickly ran inside their home. Moments later, another younger woman came towards us. "Auntie, that's enough. Let we handle our lazy employees." She spoke. "Fine. Make sure you kick them into the streets." "Yes, Auntie." "Tony, help Auntie back to the house." As soon as they left the dining area, she came running towards. Before we say anything, she started apologizing perilously. "I am so sorry about that. You know we don't work here?" "Yes, you see, she's showing signs of Alzheimer's. 6 months ago, she was walking in her old neighborhood. Not knowing who she is. Not knowing who her family members are. So, we took her in. To make sure she is safe." She continued. "She wants to comp us for the meals we just ate. We said, that won't be necessary. When my kid wanted to buy some candy. She decided to give him a box of candy. A way to apologize to us. We said yes. My cousin became friends with the family. Last week, I got a message that the aunt has just passed away. Alzheimer's is a real sad condition." The next story is titled Sephora Employees Wear All Black. A few months ago, my husband and I stopped in at Sephora at the mall. I was wearing a yellow top and white shorts and obviously pregnant. Sephora employees wear all black. I was roaming the store, holding some items, when a teen girl dressed in all black suddenly appeared in front of me and asked, "Do you have any Morphe setting spray?" Pregnancy brain in full swing, I stared at her for a second. All black means employee, right? Is she asking if I found everything I was looking for? Did I forget I had asked someone about Morphe setting spray? I asked, "I'm sorry, what?" She looked at me, also confused, and asked, "The Morphe setting spray, for the deal going on." Then I realized she thought I was an employee. I shook my head and said, "I'm sorry, I don't work here." She blinked, looked me up and down, and muttered, "Oh, sorry," and walked away. The next story is titled Sure, That Pizza Will Be There in No Time. In my youth, my mother had a small shop selling crafts and running classes about making different crafts. I would go and help by answering the phones and checking customers out. When the number for the shop was assigned, it was only 1 digit off the local Domino's pizza number. This was about 35 years ago, so numbers were not saved in your phone. In most situations you just had to dial it yourself. For the first few weeks I would consistently explain, "Oh, you have reached store name. Domino's ends in a 0, we end in an 8. The vast majority of people would get it pretty quickly when a kid says that to them. The ones who didn't, I took their order. I would even write down all the information on a slip of paper and then toss it when I was done. Thanks to a few random newer phones with redial, we would get a call back about their order not being there yet. I would use the nice explanation about the number being off by 1 digit, and that would be enough. Some people just laughed it off because I was a kid. One person, not so much. He called as we were about to leave, but had not turned the answering machine on yet. On instinct I grabbed the phone and used the greeting Mom wanted everyone to use. The customer immediately starts with, "I have a coupon for the buy one get one free today. My address." I cut him off and used my standard line. He paused for about 5 seconds and then said, "Are you saying you won't accept my coupon?" I answered that he needed to call the right number. My mother and sister were standing waiting because they were ready to go and not really interested in having me waste time. Our customer now asked, "Do I need to come in with the coupon?" Again I told him where he called, that the number was 1 digit off and he should call back. The customer finally hung up and we all assumed he heard me. The rest of this was told to me by my mother. The next morning the store's answering machine was full. Same customer calling in repeatedly, providing his address, phone number, and the order. Then calling back asking where it was. Then calling demanding a manager contact him ASAP. Apparently it kept going and the last couple messages were just 5 minutes of him saying, "Hello? Why are you not answering?" in different ways. She didn't keep the tape, which I wish she had because I really wanted to hear it, but she wiped out the messages after having a laugh. The next story is titled Book Fight. Back in the early 90s I was in secondary school, high school, in the UK and I was pretty badly bullied. One of my bullies stole my school bag, unzipped it and threw it upside down into a bin, garbage can. All my school books and other stuff inside was ruined. The school had to replace all my textbooks and workbooks, but as this was the 90s they did naff all about the bullying. The school culture of the time was, kids need to work this out for themselves, and only stepped in when they were witness to any violence. This culture changed at the end of the 90s when several high-profile bullying stories, ending in the victim ending their own lives and the backlash forced schools to change their policies on bullying. I was given some money, by my parents, to buy a French to English dictionary as my old one was unusable, as well as it stank of rotten food. On the way back home one day I walked into a store, the now defunct store chain Woolworths, as they had a book sale on. I was looking in the book section for about 10 minutes when I found the last French dictionary and I could just about afford it. I then felt someone try to snatch it out of my hand from behind me and I quickly turned around to see a woman scowling at me. Now I was a big kid, starting puberty long before my friends and I had a mustache at the age of 9. I couldn't fit into a standard school uniform, so instead my parents bought me a suit and we had the obvious school's badge stitched into the breast pocket of the blazer. I was also wearing a school tie as well as having a duffel bag, school bag, hanging from one shoulder. The employees and management all wore shirts, name tags and black trousers. I basically said, "What the hell lady? I found this book first," and she just screamed at me incoherently at me for a few seconds before shouting, "You shouldn't be buying things while on the clock and sale items should be sold to customers first." I looked at her for a few seconds, out of confusion and said, "I don't work here." Well, she didn't like that and then pushed me in the chest with both hands knocking me backwards over the stack of sale books and I somersaulted backwards over them out of sight landing at the other side of the sale display with half the display's books falling on top of me. The display was in the middle of an aisle. At that I think the manager was running over proclaiming, "What happened here?" The Karen then screamed that I, the employee, assaulted her and tried to steal her book, which I was still holding laying on the floor face down. The manager said, "I was watching you from back there," pointing to the other side of the shop, "and I could hear you screaming at this kid." The Karen said, "What kid?" I calmly stood up, from behind the display, brushed myself off and said, "I'm 13 years old. I'm a customer and," pointing at the Karen, "she just assaulted me by pushing me over these books." At this the woman looked like a deer in the headlights and bolted out the store not saying a word. The manager apologized and gave me the dictionary for free. I used the money my parents gave me to buy an art book. My mum was not pleased to have to sew my trousers, as tumbling over the stack of books ripped a pocket and part of my trouser leg down the seam. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some